The desperate call. The vast emptiness of space carried a signal that would change everything. Deep in the outer rim of the galaxy, the peaceful trading world of Viridian Prime faced complete destruction. The blue-green planet, home to 12 million gentle beings called the Keth, trembled under the assault of the savage Crimson Horde. Captain Nex of the Keth Defense Force stood in his crumbling command center, watching helplessly as another city burned on the surface below. The Keth were a species that had chosen peace over war centuries ago. They traded, they built, they created art and music that filled their world with beauty. But they had forgotten how to fight. "Sir, the northern continent has fallen," reported Lieutenant Vel, her voice shaking. "The Horde is moving toward the capital." The Crimson Horde showed no mercy. These red-skinned warriors lived only for conquest and destruction. They swept across worlds like a plague, taking what they wanted and burning the rest. Their black ships filled the sky above Viridian Prime like angry storm clouds. Nex had tried everything. The Keth's small defense fleet was destroyed in the first hour. Their planetary shields lasted only 2 days. Now, with nowhere else to turn, he made a choice that would echo across the galaxy. "Open a channel to the Galactic Council," he ordered. "Sir, they've already refused our request for military aid 3 times, Vel reminded him. "Not the Council," Nex said quietly. "Send the signal to Earth." The bridge fell silent. Everyone knew about the humans, though few had ever seen one. They were the newcomers to the galactic community, arriving only 50 years ago with their primitive ships and strange customs. Most species considered them harmless, even amusing. The humans traded fairly and kept to themselves, building small colonies in quiet corners of space. But there were stories, whispers in spaceports about what humans had done to each other on their homeworld. Tales of something called total war that made even hardened warriors uncomfortable. The galactic databases spoke of human conflicts with numbers so large they seemed impossible. "Are you certain, sir?" Vel asked. "The humans have no obligation to help us. We barely know them." Nex watched another explosion bloom on his world's surface. "Send the message." The transmission was simple and desperate. "This is Captain Nex of Viridian Prime. Our world is dying. The Crimson Horde is slaughtering our people. We have no weapons, no soldiers, no hope. We ask for aid from anyone who will listen. Please help us." The message traveled through space at light speed, carrying the plea of a dying world to a small blue planet on the edge of the galaxy. On Earth, Admiral Kane sat in the Global Defense Command Center, reviewing routine patrol reports when the communication officer approached. "Sir, we're receiving a distress call from the Viridian system. They're under attack by something called the Crimson Horde." Kane studied the message, his weathered face showing no emotion. At 62, he had seen enough war to know what desperation sounded like. The Keth were asking for help from strangers, which meant they had exhausted all other options. "What do we know about this Crimson Horde?" Kane asked. "According to our files, they're a warrior species from the Andorian sector. They've conquered 17 worlds in the past 5 years. No survivors. Complete planetary destruction." Kane was quiet for a long moment. Earth's small fleet was meant for defense, not galactic warfare. The human colonies were still young and vulnerable. Getting involved in alien conflicts went against every diplomatic protocol they had established. But then he thought about the message. 12 million innocent lives hanging in the balance. A peaceful species facing extinction because they had chosen creation over destruction. "Sir," the communication officer waited for orders. Kane stood up slowly, his decision made. "Send a reply to Viridian Prime. Tell them help is coming." "What should we mobilize, sir?" Kane walked to the great window overlooking Earth's blue oceans. Somewhere out there, people were dying while others watched and did nothing. The Galactic Council had abandoned the Keth because they offered nothing in return. The other species had turned away because it wasn't their problem. But humans understood something that the galaxy had forgotten. Sometimes, doing what's right matters more than doing what's safe. Everything, Kane said quietly. Mobilize everything. Within hours, the largest fleet in human history began to move. Ships that had never left Earth's solar system powered up their engines. Weapons that existed only in classified files were loaded onto transport vessels. And across Earth, soldiers who had trained for a war that might never come received their orders. The galaxy was about to learn what humans meant by aid. The human response. The human fleet that emerged from Earth's solar system was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Admiral Kane commanded from the bridge of the UES Retribution, a massive battleship that had been built in secret over the past decade. Around him, 200 ships of various sizes moved in perfect formation through hyperspace. "Admiral, we'll reach the Viridian system in 6 hours," reported Commander Blake, Kane's second-in-command. Long-range sensors show the Crimson Horde has positioned their fleet in orbit around the planet. Estimated enemy vessels, 400. Kane nodded calmly. The numbers were against them, but humans had faced worse odds before. "What's the status of our special cargo?" "All units are secure and ready for deployment, sir. The cargo ships are maintaining position at the fleet's center." While the Galactic Council debated and other species offered empty words of sympathy, humanity had acted. But they hadn't just sent warships. In the cargo holds of dozens of transport vessels, something waited that would change everything. On Viridian Prime, Captain Nex watched his world burn from his underground bunker. The capital city was in ruins, and Horde ground forces were hunting down the surviving Keth with brutal efficiency. The blue-skinned captain had lost contact with most of his remaining forces. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission," Lieutenant Vell called out, her voice barely audible over the explosions above. "The Council?" Nex asked without hope. "No, sir. It's the humans." The message was brief and spoken in heavily accented galactic standard. "Viridian Prime, this is Admiral Kane of the Earth Defense Fleet. We received your call for aid. Hold your position. Help is coming." Nex stared at the communication panel in disbelief. How many ships did they send? Vell worked frantically at her console, trying to get a sensor reading through the interference caused by the ongoing battle above. "I'm detecting." "Sir, this can't be right." "What is it?" "The sensors show over 200 human vessels approaching the system. And they're big, sir. Much larger than anything in our databases." Above the planet, Warlord Kresh of the Crimson Horde stood on the bridge of his flagship, enjoying the view of the dying world below. His red skin was covered in ritual scars, each one representing a world he had conquered. Soon, he would add another. "Warlord," his communications officer called out nervously. "We're detecting an approaching fleet." Kresh laughed, a sound like grinding metal. The pathetic Galactic Council finally found some courage. "How many ships?" "Unknown origin vessels, sir. The signature doesn't match any known species in our databases." That got Kresh's attention. His yellow eyes narrowed as he studied the tactical display. The approaching fleet was large, but his forces still outnumbered them 2-1. More importantly, these newcomers had never faced the Crimson Horde in battle. "Open a channel to the approaching fleet," Kresh ordered. The response came immediately, spoken in a calm, steady voice. "This is Admiral Kane of the Earth Defense Fleet. You are attacking a peaceful world and slaughtering innocent civilians. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." Kresh's laughter filled the bridge. "Earth? I've never heard of this species. Listen carefully, human. This world belongs to the Crimson Horde now. Leave, or be destroyed with the cowards you're trying to protect." There was a long pause before Kane responded. When he spoke again, his voice carried a coldness that made even Kresh's warriors uncomfortable. "We tried diplomacy. Blake, you may begin the operation." What happened next would be remembered throughout the galaxy for generations. The human fleet didn't charge forward in a glorious assault. Instead, they stopped just outside weapons range and began to deploy something the Crimson Horde had never seen before. From the cargo ships emerged thousands of small dark objects. They'd moved with purpose, spreading out in perfect patterns around the Horde fleet. Within minutes, the humans had surrounded Kresh's forces with what appeared to be an army of metal insects. "What are those things?" Kresh demanded. His tactical officer was studying the readings with growing alarm. "They appear to be some kind of automated weapon system, sir, but they're so small, and there are so many of them." Kresh sneered. "Cowards. They send machines to do their fighting. All ships, target those devices and destroy them." The Crimson Horde opened fire with everything they had. Energy beams and plasma cannons lit up space as they tried to swat the human drones from the void. But for every drone they destroyed, 10 more appeared from the human cargo ships. Then, without warning, the drones stopped moving and went completely silent. "Sir," the tactical officer reported, "the human devices have ceased all activity. It appears we've neutralized their primary weapon system." Kresh smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. "Pathetic. Open fire on the human fleet. Show them what happens to those who interfere with the Crimson Horde." But before his gunners could fire, something impossible happened. Every single drone activated simultaneously, and space itself seemed to tear apart. The unleashing. Space around the Crimson Horde fleet exploded into chaos. What Admiral Kane had deployed wasn't just weapons. It was a swarm of interconnected destruction that operated with surgical precision. Each drone was small, no larger than a human fist, but together they formed a network of devastation that defied everything the galaxy thought they knew about warfare. Warlord Kresh watched in horror as his flagship shields collapsed under a barrage unlike anything he had ever witnessed. The human drones didn't fire randomly. They coordinated their attacks with inhuman precision, targeting weak points in the Horde ship's armor that even his own engineers didn't know existed. Shields down to 30%. His weapons officer screamed over the alarms. "Sir, they're not just attacking us. They're learning our ship designs in real time." The drones swarmed over Horde vessels like metallic locusts, each one analyzing and sharing data with the others. Within minutes, they had mapped every weakness, every vulnerable system, every possible way to cripple the Crimson Horde fleet without destroying it completely. Because the humans weren't trying to kill them all. Not yet. "This is Admiral Kane." The human's voice cut through the chaos on all Horde communication channels. "You have 10 seconds to cease fire and surrender. This is your only warning." Kresh's pride would not allow retreat. "All ships, ramming speed. We'll show these humans how the Crimson Horde dies." But his ships couldn't move. The drones had disabled their engines with pinpoint accuracy, leaving the entire Horde fleet floating helplessly in space. The warriors who had conquered 17 worlds were now trapped in their own vessels, watching displays that showed hundreds of human drones positioning themselves at critical points on each ship. "Time's up," Kane said quietly. What followed would be studied in military academies for centuries to come. The human drones didn't destroy the Horde ships. They dismantled them. With microscopic precision, they began cutting through hull plating, severing control cables, and disabling life support systems. The proud warships of the Crimson Horde were being taken apart like children's toys by an enemy they couldn't even see clearly. On the surface of Viridian Prime, Captain Nex and his surviving crew watched in amazement as the orbital bombardment suddenly stopped. Through gaps in the smoke and debris, they could see flashes of light in space that marked the end of the most feared fleet in the galaxy. "Sir," Lieutenant Vell whispered, "are you seeing this?" Nex was indeed seeing it, but he couldn't believe it. The humans had neutralized 400 warships in less than 20 minutes. Not destroyed, neutralized. The Horde vessels were still intact, but completely powerless. "Get me a channel to the human admiral," Nex ordered. Kane's voice came through clearly, calm despite having just accomplished the impossible. "Captain Nex, this is Admiral Kane. The orbital threat has been eliminated. However, you still have Horde ground forces on your planet. Are you prepared for the next phase?" "Next phase?" Nex asked. "The rescue operation. We're going to need landing coordinates for every population center under attack. Before Nex could respond, new contacts appeared on his sensors. The human cargo ships were launching thousands of small craft toward the planet's surface. But these weren't weapons. They were transport pods, each one carrying something that made Nex's heart race with hope. The first pod landed in the ruins of New Keth City, where a group of Horde soldiers was cornering a family of civilians. The pod opened with a hiss of escaping atmosphere, and out stepped a figure that seemed impossible. It was a human, but not like the peaceful traders the galaxy knew. This one wore armor that seemed to absorb light itself, carried weapons that hummed with barely contained energy, and moved with the fluid grace of a predator. The human was a soldier, and everything about him spoke of violence, held in perfect control. The Horde warriors laughed when they saw the lone figure approaching. These red-skinned giants stood nearly 8 feet tall and were armed with weapons that could punch through starship armor. One human couldn't possibly challenge them. They were wrong. The human moved faster than their eyes could follow. His weapons fired with sounds like thunder, and his armor deflected their most powerful attacks as if they were throwing pebbles. In 30 seconds, 5 Horde warriors lay unconscious on the ground, their weapons destroyed and their armor cracked. The human knelt beside the terrified Keth family and spoke in their language, his voice gentle despite the destruction he had just unleashed. "You're safe now. My name is Sergeant Ross. We're here to help." Across Viridian Prime, the same scene played out thousands of times. Human soldiers emerged from their pods like avenging angels, each one capable of defeating entire squads of Horde warriors. But they didn't kill unnecessarily. They neutralized threats, protected civilians, and began the systematic liberation of an entire world. The galaxy was about to learn that when humans said aid, they meant it completely. The liberation of Viridian Prime proceeded with ruthless efficiency. Human soldiers moved through the burning cities like ghosts, appearing wherever civilians were in danger and vanishing once the threat was eliminated. The Crimson Horde, which had never known defeat, found themselves facing an enemy unlike anything in their experience. Sergeant Ross led his squad through the rubble of what had once been the planet's largest hospital. Intelligence indicated that over 300 Keth civilians were trapped in the building's lower levels, with a full company of Horde warriors between them and safety. Heat signatures show the hostiles are concentrated on floors 3 through 7, reported Corporal Martinez, studying her scanner. Civilians are in the basement levels. Ross nodded grimly. The Horde wasn't just conquering Viridian Prime. They were playing with their victims, keeping survivors alive to prolong their suffering. It was exactly the kind of cruelty that made humans see red. Davis, Thompson, secure the perimeter. Martinez, you're with me. We go in quiet until we can't go in quiet anymore. The human squad moved through the hospital like smoke. Their armor's adaptive camouflage made them nearly invisible, and their weapons were designed for precision rather than destruction. When they encountered the first group of Horde soldiers, the battle was over before the aliens knew it had begun. But this time, one of the Horde warriors managed to send a warning before Ross could stop him. Within minutes, every Crimson Horde soldier in the building knew humans were inside. "So much for stealth," Davis muttered over the comm. Ross checked his weapon's charge level. Change of plans. We go loud. What followed would become legend among the Keth survivors. The humans didn't just fight. They waged war with a precision and ferocity that left the Horde warriors stunned. Ross and his team moved through the building like a natural disaster, leaving unconscious enemies and freed civilians in their wake. On the 7th floor, Ross found himself face to face with Commander Vex, a Horde officer whose reputation for brutality was known throughout the sector. The alien stood over a group of wounded Keth children, his massive weapon trained on the helpless civilians. "One more step, human, and these creatures die," Vex snarled. Ross stopped, his hands visible and empty. "You don't want to do that." "I've killed 1,000 beings across 17 worlds," Vex boasted. "What makes you think I won't kill a few more?" Ross smiled, And there was something in that expression that made the veteran warrior take a step back. Because if you hurt those children, I'll stop trying to take you alive. The threat hung in the air for a moment before Vex made his choice. He swung his weapon toward Ross, confident that his superior size and strength would carry the day. He was wrong. Ross moved with inhuman speed, his training and technology combining to make him something beyond what the Horde could comprehend. In 3 seconds, Vex was unconscious on the floor, his weapon destroyed and his armor cracked like an eggshell. Across the planet, similar scenes played out as human forces systematically dismantled the Crimson Horde's occupation. But it wasn't just the soldiers who impressed the Keth survivors, it was what came after the fighting. Medical teams arrived within hours of each area's liberation, bringing supplies and expertise that seemed almost magical to the wounded Keth. Engineers began repairing damaged infrastructure before the smoke had cleared. Counselors who spoke perfect Keth offered comfort to traumatized civilians. Captain Nex, watching from his restored command center, could barely believe what he was seeing. Admiral Kane, this level of coordination. How is it possible? Kane's image on the viewscreen looked tired but satisfied. We've had practice, Captain. Humanity learned long ago that winning the battle is only half the job. The other half is winning the peace. But your logistics, your planning, you couldn't have prepared all this in the few hours since you received our distress call. There was a long pause before Kane answered. Captain, can I ask you something? In all your studies of human history, what did you find most disturbing? Nex thought carefully. The scale of your conflicts, I suppose. The numbers involved in your wars seemed excessive. We learned to think big because we had to, Kane explained. When you're fighting for the survival of your entire species, you develop certain habits. One of those habits is always being prepared for the worst possible scenario. You mean this entire operation was planned in advance? Kane nodded slowly. Every human colony maintains rapid response fleets. Every major population center has humanitarian supplies ready for immediate deployment. We've been preparing for galactic-scale conflicts since the day we left Earth. The full implications of this statement began to sink in throughout the Keth command structure. The humans hadn't just responded to their call for aid. They had been ready to respond before the call was even made. Admiral, Nex asked quietly, exactly how prepared is humanity for war? Kane's smile was both reassuring and terrifying. Captain, what you've seen today is just our rapid response force. The real fleet hasn't even left Earth yet. The new reality. 6 months after the liberation of Viridian Prime, the galaxy had changed forever. The Crimson Horde, once the most feared military force in known space, sat in human-administered detention facilities, undergoing what the humans called rehabilitation. Their ships had been converted into medical vessels and supply transports, their weapons turned into tools for construction and terraforming. But it wasn't the defeat of the Horde that had shaken the galactic community to its core. It was the realization of what humanity represented. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session on the neutral world of Centauri 7. Representatives from dozens of species gathered to discuss what they now called the human question. At the center of the Great Chamber, Admiral Kane sat alone at a simple table, facing the assembled delegates with calm confidence. Admiral Kane, began Counselor Prime Zethus, her tentacles writhing with barely contained anxiety. Your species' intervention at Viridian Prime has raised concerns throughout the galactic community. Kane nodded politely. I understand your concern, Counselor. Perhaps if you shared your specific worries, we could address them. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of alien voices, each species trying to voice their fears simultaneously. Finally, Counselor Vorthen of the Hegemony restored order with a sharp gesture. The issue, Admiral, is simple. Vorthen's mechanical voice translator conveyed his words with perfect clarity. Your species possesses military capabilities that exceed anything in recorded galactic history. The Crimson Horde conquered 17 worlds and maintained a fleet of nearly 2,000 ships. You neutralized them in less than 6 hours, with minimal casualties. Kane added. We saved 12 million Keth lives and prevented the complete destruction of their civilization. That's precisely the problem, interjected Counselor Yex of the Trade Federation. Your rapid response capabilities suggest a level of military preparation that concerns the peaceful species of the galaxy. Kane leaned back in his chair, studying the assembled delegates. May I ask a question, counselors? When Captain Nex sent his distress call, how many of your species responded? The chamber fell silent. Every being present knew the answer. None of you moved to help, Kane continued, his voice remaining calm and measured. The Keth faced extinction, and the galactic community offered thoughts and prayers. You had the numbers to stop the horde, but you chose not to act because it wasn't profitable or politically convenient. Counselor Prime Zethys straightened her elegant form. The Galactic Council operates on principles of non-interference and diplomatic resolution. We cannot simply. 12 million innocents would have died while you debated, Kane interrupted gently. Respectfully, Counselor, humanity operates on different principles. And that, said Vorthen, is what concerns us. Your species seems to view military intervention as a first resort rather than a last one. Kane was quiet for a long moment, considering his words carefully. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of human history. Counselors, let me tell you about a concept from our homeworld. We call it never again. It's a promise we made to ourselves after witnessing the worst that intelligent beings can do to each other. When we see innocent people suffering, when we see the strong preying on the weak, when we see civilizations facing extinction, we act. But your level of preparation, pressed Counselor Yex, suggests you were planning for galactic conquest long before the Viridian incident. Kane smiled, and several delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats. You're absolutely right. We were prepared for galactic-scale conflict before we ever left our solar system. Do you know why? The chamber waited. Because we studied you. All of you. We read your histories, your conflicts, your failures to protect the innocent. We saw the patterns. Species like the Crimson Horde rising to power, while peaceful civilizations like the Keth suffered in silence. We prepared for the day when someone would need our help, and no one else would answer. The implications of Kane's words settled over the chamber like a heavy blanket. Humanity hadn't stumbled into galactic power. They had deliberately positioned themselves as the sector's ultimate guarantor of peace. So what happens now? Asked Counselor Prime Zethys. What does humanity want from the galactic community? Kane stood slowly, his movement causing several delegates to tense visibly. The same thing we've always wanted, Counselor. To trade, to explore, to learn, and to live in peace. But we will no longer stand by while innocents suffer because their cries for help are politically inconvenient. And if the Galactic Council objects to your interventions. Kane's smile never wavered, but something in his eyes made every being in the chamber understand that humanity's patience had limits. Then perhaps it's time for a new council, one that actually protects the innocent instead of just talking about it. As Kane left the chamber, the delegates sat in stunned silence, finally understanding the new reality. The galaxy's guardians hadn't asked for permission to protect the innocent. They had simply begun doing it. The end